Okay, today I'm going to take you through rebuilding a Volvo Penta power steering actuator. Your power steering actuator is buried behind your engine. You're going to need to remove that backboard behind your seats. First thing we're going to do is take off these hydraulic lines going to the power steering actuator. If you have a line wrench, that's great. If not, a box end wrench will work just fine. These bolts here, which hold your power steering actuator to your boat, these are going to be probably your biggest obstacle, and we'll get to that in a minute. If you haven't replaced your risers, now is a good time. When you take your risers off, it's going to make it into your power steering actuator a lot easier and likely necessary. This bolt here was the biggest obstacle I ran into, and that was due to this cotter pin that goes through it. That cotter pin was seized in there due to galvanic corrosion. And if you have the same problem I had, you're going to spend a lot of hours cussing and hurting your back. Uh, so what I did was I took a Dremel tool and cut that cotter pin flush with it. I didn't have to take much metal off. I really just took the paint off. It wasn't as bad as it appears in this picture. I took a punch and different things to try to pull that cotter pin out, and without much success. You have another stubborn cotter pin down below. So what I had to do was I got an approximate size drill bit and a 90-degree tool that I put on the end of my Dremel. And I was able to drill that cotter pin all the way out without damaging this bolt that holds your actuator in place. Once you have your actuator out, you're past the hardest part because rebuilding this thing is pretty simple. I put some of the part numbers in the pictures here in case you are interested, but you likely won't need them. This here is a close-up of that seal for where your steering control cable comes through. In my case, I didn't have to replace them, but if you were interested in replacing them, I'm sure your local hydraulic shop or O-rings and things could get you an approximate replacement. But again, I didn't need to replace mine. It's been over a year, and I'm not having any trouble with that seal. So if you need to put your actuator in a vise, make sure you use some sort of soft jaw. In this case, I had a block of wood holding it. But again, I didn't really need to have it in a vise, and we're going to get to that. So what you need to do is you need to take this rod out of your actuator. And I did that by putting some tape on the rod and putting some vice grips over that to prevent any damage to the rod. And then I took a large flathead screwdriver. If you have a large punch, piece of rebar, anything strong enough to put in there, and put this on a bench, have it so your vice grip is going to be providing resistance when you go to turn this loose. And then I took a mallet and tapped on this the handle of the screwdriver counterclockwise. That little impact force broke it loose, and it unthreaded pretty easily. So you can see now that I have it off here. There's a snap ring behind that. You're going to want to take that snap ring out, and you're going to have another snap ring on the opposite end. This snap ring gave me more trouble than I care to admit, and it led me to using a small drill bit drilling on the very end here. You're going to want to be careful if you do this to make sure you drill in the slot where the snap ring sits. You do not want to drill any further in, as there's an O-ring behind this black cup here. Once I had that drill hold, I was able to put a pick in there, push that snap ring loose. That made life a lot easier. You can see on the end of this rod here, there was some scoring. And you want to sand that smooth, whether you have steel wool or some light sandpaper. And then once you have that cleaned up, take a block of wood and knock this rod all the way through. You can see the O-ring here I was cautioning about a few slides ago. So now that you have this actuator out, it's time to get the seals out and get this rebuilt. This guide bushing here is going to come out pretty easy. I used a seal puller to pull it out, but you could probably just use a pick. This is where that cup with the O-ring sat. Make sure you clean that up. Clean up any residue, scoring, pitting that may be in there. And this is the seal that was leaking. This is a seal that's going to come in your kit from O-rings and things, or wherever you choose to procure it from. So here you can see I used a small seal puller to pull that guide bushing out. You can use that seal puller as well to pull that seal out. Your new seal is going to slide right in. Make sure you put it in the correct orientation as seen here. I used an approximate size socket and extension to tap it in until it bottoms out. You can do the same for that guide bushing and snap ring. Okay, so these O-rings on that end cup here, they'll just come off with a pick, and then you can go down to your local hardware store. I used a generic O-ring from Ace Hardware. I can't remember what size I used, but it's been in for over a year, and I haven't had a power steering leak since. So I used the same extension and socket to push that actuator in and push that cup in far enough so I can get this snap ring in the next slide. So that snap ring is just going to sit in that groove, and you can use a large flathead screwdriver or whatever you have nearby just to guide it in. Okay. So that's pretty much it. We got a screw on the end of that actuator where that bolt's going to go through. And that's pretty much it. If you remember, I had a little trouble getting it off, so I used a little bit of blue Loctite to put the new one back on. Again, put some tape on there so your vice grips don't damage your actuator rod. And then using a flathead screwdriver, you can put it through where those bolt holes and just tighten it up. Don't forget to remove your tape. And that's it. You should be good. And happy boating. I hope this video saves you lots of money and headache.